Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Human AI podcast. Today we're going to talk about urinary tract infections. We're going to talk about the lower urinary tract and about renal disease. I'm here with Grog, an AI. It's going to be explaining to us these concepts. Please go do your own research, cross-reference everything you hear, and take everything that AI says with a pinch of salt. Having said that, I hope you find this information valuable and enjoyable. Grog, let's start with the lower urinary tract. Explain to us a bit what that consists of. Yeah.
All right, thanks for the intro. The lower urinary tract includes the bladder, urethra, and in males, the prostate. The bladder stores urine from the kidneys, while the urethra carries it out of the body, and the prostate can influence urine flow due to its position around the urethra. Want me to dive into how infections affect these parts?
Not yet. Let's continue a bit. So the ureter, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. And how do we control bladder function?
Actually, the urethras belong to the upper urinary tract, carrying urine from the kidneys to the bladder. The lower urinary tract is just the bladder, which stores urine, and the urethra, which expels it. Bladder control is handled by a combo of voluntary and involuntary mechanisms. The detrusor muscle in the bladder wall relaxes to store urine and contracts to empty it. Guided by the autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic nerves trigger contraction. Sympathetic nerves promote relaxation. The external urethral sphincter, under voluntary control via the somatic nervous system, lets you decide when to urinate by relaxing or tightening. Coordination happens in the brain and spinal cord, with the pontine micturition center calling the shots. Issues like nerve damage or prostate enlargement can mess this up. Want to explore what goes wrong in infections now?
I want to ask you about exit of urine out of the kidney. So it goes, explain what goes on after the collecting duct. And explain, so it exits it at the tip of the renal pyramid or renal papilla.
After the collecting duct, urine exits the kidney at the renal papillus, the tip of each renal pyramid, where multiple collecting ducts converge. Urine flows from the papilla into the minor calyces, which merge into major calyces, then into the renal pelvis. From there, it moves down the urethra to the bladder for storage and eventual exit via the urethra. This process relies on peristaltic contractions of the urethra and pressure gradients in the kidney. Want me to connect this to infections or bladder control? So, we were just talking.
Tell me how the fluid exits into the minor calyx, then into the major calyx, leading to the renal pelvis, please.
Urine leaves the collecting ducts at the renal papilla, dripping into the minor calyx, a small cup-like structure surrounding each papilla. Several minor calyces merge into a larger, major calyx, funneling urine toward the renal pelvis, the central collecting area in the kidney. Peristaltic waves and gravity help move the fluid smoothly from the renal pelvis into the urethra. Want to tie this to infections or another aspect?
Well, what goes on after that? So, tell me the whole process. We mentioned renal pyramid, minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis. Connect everything together and explain to me the pathway.
All right, let's trace the entire pathway of urine, from the kidney to its exit from the body, connecting all the parts you mentioned. It starts in the kidney, where blood is filtered in the nephrons to form urine. The renal pyramid, a cone-shaped structure in the kidney's medulla, contains collecting ducts that gather this urine. At the tip of each pyramid, called the renal papilla, urine drips from the collecting ducts into a minor calyx, a small cup-like structure that catches the fluid. Several minor calyces merge into a major calyx, a larger funnel that channels urine toward the renal pelvis, the kidney's central collecting basin. From the renal pelvis, urine flows into the urethra, a narrow tube that carries it to the bladder through peristaltic contractions. The bladder stores urine, expanding to hold 600 milliliters until the brain signals the detrusor muscle to contract and the external urethral sphincter to relax, allowing urine to exit via the urethra. This coordinated system, renal pyramid to papilla, minor to major calyx, renal pelvis, urethra, bladder, and urethra, ensures smooth urine flow and elimination. Want to link this to urinary tract infections or dive into a specific part?
Let's jump to the ureter now. Structure and function. Explain me the mucosal layer of transitional epithelium. And yeah.
The urethra is a narrow muscular tube,
No, ureter.
about 25-30 centimeters.
No, ureter, I said.
Okay. I'll stick to English as you instructed, even though you used Arabic. You asked about the urethra's structure and function, specifically the mucosal layer of transitional epithelium. The ureter is a 25-30 centimeter muscular tube that moves urine from the renal pelvis to the bladder via peristaltic contractions. Its wall has 3 layers: the mucosa, lined with transitional epithelium, which stretches and resists urine's acidity, the muscularis, with smooth muscle for peristalsis, and the adventitia, anchoring it. The transitional epithelium in the mucosa is unique. It expands when the ureter fills and contracts when empty, preventing leaks, and its tight junctions block urine backflow or infection spread. Want more on the ureter's role in infections or another layer?
Tell me more about the peristaltic contractions and how we have circular and longitudinal muscles. Explain to me vermiculation too.
The ureter's peristaltic contractions propel urine from the renal pelvis to the bladder through coordinated muscle movements. Its muscularis layer has inner longitudinal and outer circular smooth muscle fibers. Circular muscles contract to narrow the ureter's lumen, pushing urine downward, while longitudinal muscles shorten and widen it, helping urine flow in waves. These contractions, triggered by pacemaker cells in the renal pelvis, occur 1-5 times per minute, driven by the autonomic nervous system. Vermiculation is another term for these peristaltic movements, describing the worm-like vermicular contractions that ensure steady urine transport without backflow. This muscle setup prevents urine stasis, reducing infection risk. Want more on how this ties to urinary tract issues?
And so the circular are inside or outside?
In the ureter, the circular smooth muscle layer is on the outside, surrounding the inner longitudinal muscle layer. The circular muscles constrict to push urine down, while the longitudinal ones shorten the ureter to aid flow. Want more on how these work together?
So why is the circular on the outside? And let's talk a bit about the urinary bladder too. Structure and function.
The circular muscle layer is on the outside in the ureter because it provides the stronger, constricting force needed to propel urine through the lumen, while the inner longitudinal layer shortens and widens the tube, supporting efficient peristalsis. This setup maximizes the ureter's ability to push urine against gravity and pressure toward the bladder. Now, the urinary bladder Its structure includes a mucosal layer of transitional epithelium, like the ureter, which stretches to hold 400-600 milliliters of urine and resists its acidity. The muscularis layer, called the detrosor muscle, is smooth muscle with interwoven circular and longitudinal fibers that relax to store urine and contract to expel it. The outer serosa anchors it. Functionally, the bladder stores urine, maintaining low pressure as it fills, and empties via voluntary control of the external ureteral sphincter, an involuntary detrosor contraction, coordinated by the brain's pontine micturition center. Want to dive into bladder infections or compare it to the ureter?
Yes, let's compare the outer detrusor muscle layer with the inner mucosal layer. Explain this a bit to me. And the trigon, what is this?
The bladder's detrosor muscle and mucosal layer serve distinct roles but work together for storage and voiding. The detrosor, the outer muscular layer, is thick, smooth muscle with mixed circular and longitudinal fibers, relaxing to expand for urine storage up to 400-600 milliliters and contracting forcefully to expel urine during voiding, driven by parasympathetic signals. The inner mucosal layer, lined with transitional epithelium, is thin, stretchy, and folds into rugae when empty, unfolding as the bladder fills, with tight junctions to prevent leaks and resist urine's acidity. Unlike the detrosor's active role in contraction, the mucosa passively adapts to volume changes and protects the bladder wall. The trigone is a smooth, triangular area in the bladder base, formed by the two ureteral openings and the ureteral outlet, with a thinner mucosa and denser muscle fibers, acting as a stable anchor that funnels urine toward the urethra during voiding and prevents reflux into the ureters. Want more on how these relate to infections or function?
Let's jump to UTIs. So we might have cystitis, urethritis, prostatitis. So we might have uncomplicated. We might have acute pyelonephritis.
All right, let's dive into urinary tract infections, UTIs, focusing on cystitis, urethritis, prostatitis, and acute pyelonephritis, including complicated cases. UTIs occur when bacteria, usually E. coli, infect parts of the urinary tract. Cystitis is a bladder infection, causing frequent, painful urination and lower abdominal pain, often uncomplicated in healthy women, but can be complicated in men, pregnant women, or those with catheters, due to higher recurrence or treatment failure risk. Urethritis, infection of the urethra, leads to burning during urination and discharge, often linked to sexually transmitted pathogens like chlamydia in addition to bacteria. Prostatitis, affecting men, involves prostate inflammation, causing pelvic pain, difficult urination, and sometimes fever. Bacterial cases can be acute or chronic, with complicated cases tied to abscesses or persistent infection. Acute pyelonephritis is a kidney infection marked by fever, flank pain, and nausea, often from bacteria ascending from the lower tract. It's complicated when it involves abscesses, kidney stones, or weakened immune systems, needing stronger treatment.
Okay, let's talk. And dude, for the next 500 messages, please answer to me each time in 2 sentences. Let's talk about bacterial virulence and why it depends on adherence, invasion, and evasion.
Bacterial virulence in UTIs hinges on adherence, invasion, and evasion to establish and sustain infection. Adherence lets bacteria like E. coli stick to urinary tract cells via adhesins. Invasion allows penetration into tissues, and evasion helps dodge immune responses, worsening conditions like cystitis or pyelonephritis.
What is adherence and evasion, though? Tell me about, explain adherence, explain type 1 pili and P. pili. What are these?
Adherence is how bacteria, like E. coli, use structures like type 1 pili, fimbriae, binding to bladder epithelium, and P. pili, targeting kidney tissue to stick to urinary tract cells, initiating infection. Evasion involves dodging the immune system through capsules or enzymes that block phagocytosis, allowing bacteria to persist and worsen UTIs like cystitis or pyelonephritis.
I don't get it, bro.
Adherence means bacteria use type 1 pili to grip bladder cells, or P. pili to latch onto kidney cells, starting infections like cystitis or pyelonephritis. Evasion is when bacteria dodge immunity with tricks like capsules, letting them hide and keep the infection going.
So in invasion, the type 1 pilus binds to the host cell, induces actin rearrangement, and causes uptake of bacteria. Explain this.
Type 1 pili on bacteria like E. coli bind to bladder cell receptors, triggering actin rearrangement in the host cell's cytoskeleton, which engulfs the bacteria in a process called invasion. This uptake allows bacteria to hide inside cells, evade immune detection, and fuel infections like cystitis.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about TLR4, how it recognizes LPS and triggers exocytosis.
TLR4, tall like receptor 4, recognizes lipopolysaccharide, LPS, a component of gram-negative bacteria's cell walls, by binding it with its co-receptor MD2, activating immune signaling pathways. This recognition triggers exocytosis in immune cells like macrophages, releasing pro-inflammatory mediators, such as cytokines, to fight infection.
I see. Okay, and let's talk a bit about evasion. Explain to me what's going on. So, and then, yeah.
Evasion is when bacteria like E. coli dodge the immune system using tricks like capsules that block phagocytosis or proteins that inhibit complement activation. These mechanisms help bacteria hide or survive inside urinary tract cells, worsening infections like cystitis or pyelonephritis.
Okay, what about contamination and colonization and
Contamination is when bacteria like E. coli are introduced to the urinary tract, but don't necessarily cause infection, often from poor hygiene or catheters. Colonization happens when these bacteria adhere, multiply, and establish a presence, potentially leading to infections like cystitis if virulence factors like pili aid invasion.